As someone who's wasted no time at all coasting through life, I know what it takes to be average, and so do the biggest names in watchmaking. They think we don't notice when they phone it in, but we do. But what about when they try their hardest and actually make an effort? You get the best watches they can make, and for your viewing pleasure, here they are. We're going to set the bar high, starting with Patek Philippe, because already Patek Philippe's watches sit a tier or two above everyone else's, by the very nature of them being Patek Philippe's. It's the old money family from the big city. It can do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, and even if it's crap, it's still good because everyone's too scared to say otherwise. Patek Philippe could show up to work with a wet patch on its crotch, and no one would say a word. Its status isn't unearned though. It's just been around the block a few times more than anyone else, and that means its biggest, heaviest hitter is actually a few years old now. The original version of the monster Grandmaster Chime appeared 10 years ago in 2014, and it remains the pinnacle of the Patek Philippe collection, with a suggested retail price of about $3 million. They go for a little more than that though, trading anywhere between $10 and $30 million, which seems like an entirely sensible amount of money for a watch. The name, I hope, is inspired less by the virtuosos of the royal game and more by late 70s hip-hop, and judging by the musicality of this chiming watch and Patek Philippe CEO Thierry Stern's insistence on listening to every single one before it's shipped out, I'm pretty sure it's the latter. Legend says Stern has been known to spit bars at Patek Philippe executive retreats. At 47.7mm wide and 16.07mm thick, the Grandmaster Chime is going to have someone's eye out, but I can think of no better way to become a Cyclops. In white and rose gold with a guilloche brown dial, it is the stroopwafel of watches, containing just as many calories, if by calories you actually mean parts. There are no less than 214 parts in total, which you may find disappointing, to which I would retort that that's just the case. The caliber 300 GS AL 36-750 QIS FUS IRM, to give it its full name, adds another 1,366. Patek Philippe made a fundamental error naming its movements after the complications within, when it decided to squeeze 20 into the Grandmaster Chime. That's pay by the cup pick-a-mix levels of squeezing. Even with that size, I'm surprised Patek Philippe could even get the lid on, which is the rule of both pay by the cup pick-a-mix and watchmaking, I'm led to believe. As well as the obvious, those complications include a programmable alarm that strikes the time at the time you programmed it to strike, a crown position indicator, and even a date repeater that strikes the date on command. These many displays are spread evenly between the front and back, which begs the question, how does one view the inverse side? Why, the case flips around, of course. When the world collectively snorted at Audemars Piguet's efforts to prove it wasn't a one-trick pony in 2019 with the Code 1159, it created a monster. As any good story of brutal revenge starts, fresh from humiliation, Audemars Piguet stormed back to Le Brassus, fists balled, screaming, "I'll show you! I'll show all of you!" And then it made the Code 1159 Ultra Complication Universelle. It's the watch equivalent of selecting a web page's recommended choice for cookies, by which it means all of them, because the Ultra Complication Universelle has all the complications. There are 40 functions in total within the caliber 1000, so named because it has exactly 1,155 parts. The complications come under 4 main categories: chronograph, chiming, perpetual calendar, and other, which includes a secret switch to open the case back and release all those loose arm hairs that fell in through the sound vents. The 42 by 15.6mm size is impressive given how much Audemars Piguet has fitted inside it. They probably employed the guy who puts cables into blister packs. It's possible to see a part of that through the sapphire caseback, with the automatic winding rotor sitting peripherally around the chronograph's split-second mechanism. Engraved into the rotor weight is a sound wave, which is actually a recording of the CEO telling the person who came up with the Code 1159 that if this doesn't sell, they're fired. Starting at $1.5 million, the Ultra Complication Universelle is one of the more expensive examples of retribution. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter how many complications it has, it doesn't change the fact that code still stands for challenge, own, dare, and evolve. Normally, a company leaves its core values on the intranet homepage to keep its staff's spirits broken, but in this case, that technique has been trialled unsuccessfully with consumers as well. Turns out, they'd still rather have a royal oak. The biggest problem when inventing a watch with lots of complications is finding places to put them. When I add to my collection of ceramic frogs, my wife says to me, "You need to find somewhere for these to go, or else I will." And it's the same mentality with these watchmakers. There are two sides to a watch, which makes it a game of fitting as much as possible into those two sides. Or, in the case of Jaeger-LeCoultre, just add more sides. No, the Reverso Hybris Mechanica isn't the world's first cuboid watch. It instead takes the Reverso form factor and uses the two additional sides to add more complications. So you've got the front and back of the reversible part of the Reverso case, as we've seen many a time before, and then also the front and rear of the static portion that holds the lugs too. Now, I know what you're thinking. What is this witchcraft? And I'll be honest, I still haven't figured it out. The cradle, as it's known, contains 4 different moon displays, including eclipse events and supermoons. Yes, the mechanism for that is contained within the cradle itself. That then has to somehow connect with the parent mechanism in the reversible case, and it's about then that cerebrospinal fluid starts to leak from my ear. There are 11 complications in total, including a perpetual calendar, tourbillon and minute repeater with 800 parts all in. That squares it away nicely at a reasonably normal 51.2mm tall by 31mm wide. That's not too dissimilar to a standard duo face, although the 15.15mm thickness adds an extra half centimeter. Funnily enough, Jaeger-LeCoultre actually quotes the water resistance of the Reverso Hybris Mechanica as 30 meters, enough to get some splashes on it, but at $1.6 million, I don't think there'll be much of that going on. The closest thing this will get to water will be the complimentary bottles of sparkling at the dealership. Somehow IWC misheard the request to make thinner watches as, "Can you make the chunkiest watch yet?" and promptly obliged with the 2011 17.6mm thick Siderale Scafusia. IWC is no stranger to making watches for people with aspirations on a larger scale, and so it is true of the Siderale Scafusia, giving its wearer the power to track some pretty intense levels of astronomical time that they will definitely most certainly need. Let me paint the picture. You're sat in the garden on a sunny afternoon, the blazing sun high up in the sky, and you know by the rules of our planet that it is midday. But wait, you sit bolt upright because of course you know that this timekeeping methodology is a sham, based on a system of revolution compounded with revolution that measures a single rotation of the Earth as precisely 360.986 degrees, 0.986 degrees more than the actual rotation of the Earth, and your day is ruined. Because the Earth orbits the Sun, basically our timekeeping is bodged to make sure midday sticks the Sun back in the centre, and we don't drift over time and have sunrise at 4 PM in the afternoon. But for the pedants and the sticklers who want to keep tabs on the sidereal time, which measures a pinpoint 360-degree rotation, the IWC Siderale Scafusia has got your back. Why is sidereal time useful? Because stars relative to Earth comply with an actual day, a 360-degree spin, not a solar day, which gets that little bit extra. Positional data for astronomers over time needs a system relative to the night sky, and not the apparent movement of the Sun, and so the 23-hour, 56-minute and 4-second sidereal day leaps into action. It's not as simple as all that though, because getting from solar time to sidereal time takes more than just a simple gearing. First, you need a very accurate timekeeping base, and for that IWC has incorporated a tourbillon with 96 hours of power reserve, where the first 2 days are precisely controlled with a constant force mechanism that evens out the minute differences in torque as the spring winds down. Then, because solar time and sidereal time deviate depending on the time of year and the position of the Sun relative to the Earth in its orbit, you need a calendar, a perpetual one, that specifically measures the year in numbered days to compensate. And since you've already got all that information, for the $750,000 asking price, may as well chuck in a dynamic star chart that pictures the night sky, and sunrise and sunset indicators too. As the watch of the people, with a few thousand to spend on a watch I might add, it's no surprise that Tudor's collection goes without any masterful watchmaking. You won't find any perpetual chronographs and chiming tourbillons here. In fact, the best you're going to get remains unchanged from the entry to mid-price points Tudor has to offer, the Black Bay 58. What makes this one special? It takes the formula of the 925 silver Black Bay 58 and turns it all the way up to the 18K ancient Egyptian favourite, yellow gold. unusually finished in a brushed texture rather than a mirror polish, and contrasted with green for the dial and bezel. This is not only the most expensive watch Tudor makes, but also the one that pretends hardest to be a Rolex. Its £15,510 asking price not only competes very squarely with much of Rolex's lineup, but the thing is also dressed quite boldly in the Rolex company colours. It's the watch that brings in an apple for the teacher and tells the other kids to be quiet so they can learn. Also, its daddy is the principal. All of these watches share a similar conundrum. Who are they actually for? The Tudor, however, despite being magnitudes cheaper than what we've seen so far, is probably the one this applies to the most. It wouldn't be fair to compare this to a fully kitted out Hyundai costing more than a base BMW, because at least a fully kitted out Hyundai still feels like a bargain. The Black Bay 58 18K is a McDonald's truffle burger with a slice of foie gras and caviar sauce. It is so decadently average, it's like discovering the homeless guy sleeping at the train station is actually a tech billionaire. For the correct response to all these scenarios, we look to the annoying curiosity of youth. Why? Why would anyone want a solid gold Tudor? Because f*** you, that's why. That should really be Tudor's slogan. The 18K is Tudor's ethos amped up to the max, because after all, it is the teenager to Rolex's sensible adult older brother. It can do what it wants when it wants, and you're going to let it, because if you don't, you're going to get in trouble with Rolex. The default approach to making a halo product for many watch brands is to simply take the watch you've already got and to stick a tourbillon in it. It's the casual name drop of the watch industry, the as a mother of every horological outlet looking to score some kudos. Stick 2 concrete lions outside the front of this ordinary semi-detached estate home, and now it's mixing with the big leagues. And it is impressive, or at least it was when it first appeared in 2016 for £12,000. Now it's just a hair under £20,000, and whilst it's still decent value for a Swiss tourbillon, it's no longer the mic drop it once was. It's been updated to the glassbox form factor, which does look pretty damn smart, however. It's also leading the way in a general leap in prices across the Tag Heuer range. I know Tag Heuer are sick of being considered the most expensive cheap watch, but it really is a problem of their own making. When times were tough, instead of sticking to its principles and going down with the ship, it put on some cheap lipstick and started offering $5 friendship down the docks with the plastic F1. Still, all that's in the past, and the 42mm Carrera Chronograph tourbillon is the bright possibility of a solid future, a Cardi B level rags to riches story that can in no way come unraveled at the seams. Do you remember those people who said Cartier wasn't a watchmaker? Cartier remembers. And now it's gone all out in exacting its revenge by trying to fry the brains of its naysayers into a puddle of goop with a watch even Chris Nolan doesn't get, the Cartier Rotonde de Cartier Masse Mysterieuse. The name may be as cringe as that one guy who refers to himself in the third person, but the watch itself means more business than Elon Musk browsing social media platforms he disagrees with. The watch is inspired by Louis Cartier's childhood obsession with being a wizard, which he channeled through mystery clocks that displayed the time by seemingly levitating the hands in thin air. The Masse Mysterieuse does that, but with a twist. Instead of hiding the movement away in the periphery of the watch, it's there in plain sight, completely encapsulated within the free-spinning winding rotor of the watch. And it's all just floating there in much the same way bricks don't. At first you're like, yeah, I can see the strings or whatever, but the more you think about it, the less sense it makes. How does the movement spin and the hands stay relatively still, while still actually moving slowly with the time, which is regulated by the very thing that's whizzing around it? I haven't been this confused since that blue and gold dress. There's one thing I can assure you it's not: magnets. This system is very much reliant on the age-old mechanics of watchmaking, with a similar usage of clear discs to the original mystery clocks. Aha, you might think, I have the secret. Yeah, but it's not as simple as that. Even knowing sapphire discs are involved makes this no easier to figure out than long division on a roller coaster. If you are indeed compelled to go further in deciphering the ways of the Masse Mysterieuse, I thoroughly suggest you tell a friend and bring a towel. The default approach to making a halo product for many watch brands is to simply take the watch they've already got and to stick a tourbillon in it, and Breitling's at it too. Little bit pricier this time though, at £58,000. Granted, the 42mm case is made of the catalytic converter thief's favourite metal, platinum, and the watch is part of Breitling's upmarket Premier collection, which does sound a little bit like the fancy own brand food you get at the supermarket when you've got guests coming round. Breitling proudly states a partnership with movement maker La Joux-Perret to make a watch that manages to look exactly like that really cheap fake Breitling that one guy on Reddit got left by his granddad. I think it's the tourbillon bridge that does it. The rest of the watch is, while big, incredibly elegant, but the tourbillon bridge looks like a piece of leftover Meccano. The reverse of the watch is far more impressive, but £58,000 impressive. You could buy an Erlangen-Zoner 1815 chronograph for that. Probably what interests me most about this watch is the business case behind it. I very much admire what Breitling is doing at the moment, and I think the Premier collection is one of the prettiest available. But clearly the Premier B21 chronograph tourbillon takes a level of logic I do not possess. There's not been this much confidence in an idea since Stockton Rush reached the end of the toilet paper. It's probably just a Hail Mary. Sell just one and you're laughing. In a world of 7.8 billion people, there's got to be at least one person who wants to pay 8 times more than the standard watch for one that looks a little bit worse. Do you remember those people who said Omega milked the Speedmaster dry? Omega remembers. So it set out to build the most insane Speedmaster anyone had ever seen in one of watchmaking's biggest hold my beer moments in recorded history. But how to achieve such a feat? There's the old classic, the tourbillon. We've already seen 2 watches that combine a chronograph with a tourbillon, and I don't think they had the desired effect. Okay, how about a perpetual calendar instead? Jornsville. The Speedmaster has and always will be known for measuring time. It's a thoroughbred chronograph that's been used in anger to bring people back safely from space. A perpetual calendar would be like a pat on the head and a wowie pop. Good boy, Speedmaster. No, Omega wanted this thing to be more nuts than when Nutty the Nuthatch nutted into a jar of nutty butter. So they started with the beat, which they cranked up from 8 to 10. It's the fastest a coaxial escapement has ever been. Swissy was sure it couldn't take it, but it could. Then they gave it a split seconds complication. That's where a push of the button slices the second hand in half so you can keep the timing going whilst recording a moment along the way. A complication hasn't looked this cool since Darth Maul's lightsaber went in both directions. But here's the moment when Omega put the plastic cutlery down and joined the table with the big boys. They added a repeater. No, not your ordinary vanilla flavour minute repeater, a chronograph repeater. There doesn't seem to be any claim on this being the first chronograph repeater, which Omega is calling Chrono Chime, but I've never heard of one before. And I'm surprised I haven't. It's got more "why did nobody think of that" factor than putting wheels on a suitcase. Minute repeaters are at the best of times tricky to do, with 3 cams constantly measuring the hours, quarters and minutes for the racks to accurately request the right amount of chimes from the gongs. The Chrono Chime shifts that up a gear or 10 by reading minutes, tens of seconds and seconds, which means the fastest cam is turning once per minute instead of once per hour. It's a flurry of mechanical complexity that would otherwise be impossible with a standard spinning governor, and so Omega has dared to tread where Cartier didn't and resort to the darker side of engineering to make it possible. Yes, magnets. A tiny ring of magnets sandwiches the governor to precisely control its speed to make sure it doesn't blow up like an oxygen tank built by the lowest bidder. And there's nothing cheap about this behemoth 45 by 17.37mm rose gold Speedmaster, because it's priced at an interstellar £484,300. If there's one manufacturer out there that gets stick for making simple watches, it's Rolex. Why have a chronograph when you can slap a turning bezel on instead? Why have an independent GMT hand when you can slap a turning bezel on instead? Why? You get the picture. That the 2012 Sky-Dweller annual calendar could be the most complicated watch the brand had ever made is pretty shameful at first glance, but there's a lot more going on with it than first meets the eye. The Sky-Dweller isn't designed to be some tech showcase, only available to the 3 people in the world who can afford their own island. In steel and white gold, it's comfortably cheaper than the 18K Black Bay 58 we saw earlier. But it's only an annual calendar, is the criticism that gets levied at it, not a full-blown perpetual. An annual calendar is the Liam Hemsworth to the perpetual's Chris, but Rolex has a few tricks up its sleeve yet. You might perhaps be wondering what a calendar complication has to do with the sky, and unless Ryanair delays are even worse than I remember, it doesn't. That's because the Sky-Dweller throws in another complication, just for fun, an off-center GMT wheel that can be used in conjunction with the independently settable hour hand to keep track of a second time zone. And as for the annual calendar itself, it's smarter than a $100 haircut, because rather than clutter up the dial with indicators for the days and months, it incorporates the kind of packaging that could put Adrian Newey back into retirement. Even with a perpetual calendar, unless you've been sent back from the future to kill John Connor, all you really need to know is the date. The rest is just to set the thing. So the Sky-Dweller has the date pride of place, under magnification as Rolex is well known for doing, and hides the display needed to set it, the month, around the hours. 12 months, 12 hours, and the only indication is the window that's coloured red. Where Rolex becomes roll safe is with the management of these systems. You won't find any wart-like hidden in inverted commas pushes here because it's all set by the crown. But how? Does the crown pull out more times than a bad Catholic? No sir, it works in conjunction with the one good thing about the Yachtmaster 2, the ring command bezel. Turning the bezel seats it in one of a few positions that then changes the function of the crown. It's the ultimate definition of beauty in tragedy. What do you think are the best watches from the biggest name brands? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe, and don't forget to reserve your sun lounger for later with a towel. Goodbye. Still here? Watch this video next.